Hello YouTube, Mike Cohanum here. Today I'm going to talk about the deck I used to win the Duel Links main event in July. This was an official tournament that happened about 2 weeks ago, which I took first place in using my Shaddolls deck. In this video, I'll show off the deck list, give an overview of how the deck is supposed to work, the general strategy behind it, the insight behind some of the card choices, and I will show a replay from the duel room of the finals match. There are a bunch of new releases that will change the metagame a bit. Sky Strikers are getting a lot stronger with the release of Kagari in a bundle and Sky Striker Mobilizing Gauge in a mini box. And the addition of Nibiru the Primal Being is likely to affect PvP dueling also. But I think this deck will remain relevant in the metagame unless it gets hit by a Forbidden and Limited list because of the strengths that it has. I think that Sky Striker might be a bad matchup with the new cards that are released, but Nibiru really won't affect this deck because it rarely summons 5 or more times in one turn. So I think it's important to know how to use the deck and how to play against the deck, because I don't think it's going anywhere short of a Forbidden and Limited list hit. The Shadow Weaving Power skill is an archive skill, so you can use it with any character. I was using it with Spectre just because he was the only character I had who wasn't at max level. It really doesn't matter what character you attach it to. The skill itself puts 2 Shadow trap cards from your deck into the graveyard at the start of the duel and adds 1 copy of Winda to your extra deck, as well as 3 copies of Shaddolls Fusion and a Shaddolls Schism to your main deck at the start of the duel. That's kind of a lot, but it's pretty simple. You're sending 2 Shaddolls traps. The deck is playing 2 copies of Resh Shaddolls Incarnation, which, since those are the only 2 Shaddolls traps in the deck, the skill will always send those 2 cards to the graveyard at the start of the duel. This card will let you banish another Shaddolls card from your grave to flip a Shaddolls monster on your field, either face up or face down. You'll usually do it if you draw well, you'll already have everything you need to fusion summon with El Shaddolls Fusion or the Shaddolls Fusion that the skill puts into your deck, and you won't immediately need to resort to Resh Shaddolls Incarnation until you have Shaddolls monsters in the graveyard, and then you're able to use both copies of the Resh Shaddolls Incarnations to flip 2 monsters up or down through the course of the duel by banishing one of your Shaddolls monsters each time instead of having to banish the second copy of Resh Shaddolls Incarnation. If you draw poorly, you can then resort to setting a monster like typically Shaddolls Hedgehog, and then you immediately using the effect of the Resh Shaddolls Incarnation in your graveyard to banish the second copy, trigger the Hedgehog's effect, and then get a Shaddolls spell or trap card that you need to get your plays started. It's really not bad to do that if you don't have a strong first turn play. If it sets up a turn 1 Winda, particularly going first, then it's generally worthwhile. You don't want to be doing nothing on your first turn and risk just getting OTK'd by your opponent. But if you draw really well, you'll be able to keep these in the graveyard until you have a Shaddolls monster in there, and you'll get 2 uses over the course of the duel. That's probably the second strongest part of the skill. The strongest part of the skill, in all likelihood, is the ability that adds Winda and the 3 copies of Shaddolls Fusion and the Shaddolls Schism to your deck at the start of the duel. These cards are all unavailable except through the skill, and they really are what carry the deck. El Shaddolls Winda is a fusion of a Shaddolls monster plus a dark monster. You have tons of dark monsters in the deck, so it's easy to summon. A lot of players play Super Polymerization as well because opponents use a lot of dark monsters, so you can summon Winda that way. But Winda makes it so that your opponent can only each player can only special summon once per turn while it's face up on the field, and Winda itself can't be destroyed by an opponent's card effects. So Winda's really hard to get rid of, and a lot of decks really can't handle Winda with only a single special summon in a turn. So against a lot of decks, summoning Winda is pretty much the end of it. I played against an Unchained deck in the tournament. I summoned Winda in one of the games, and that was basically it. Most of the Unchained cards destroy cards, which Winda is immune to, and they really can't do anything without link summoning, and it's really tough to link summon even a link 2, starting with 0 monsters on the field, and only getting to special summon once. So this thing can be hard to take down, and it works as a silver bullet against a lot of decks. You can only get it with the skill. The second card that gets added are the 3 copies of Shaddolls Fusion. This is a fusion spell. If you're going first, it doesn't do much beyond, it's basically acts as polymerization. But if your opponent goes first, this is an incredible card to draw, because if they summon a monster from the extra deck, Shaddolls Fusion will let you fuse from your deck. So that gives you immediate access to your strongest fusion monsters, and this is a fusion-based deck. Shaddolls Schism is basically... it's a way to fusion summon during the main phase on your opponent's turn. You could also do it on your own turn, and it's a continuous source of being able to fusion summon, which makes it really strong. It's searchable by the flip effect of Shaddolls Hedgehog, and very often it's used to special summon Winda during your opponent's main phase in response to a card they activate that special summons. So if you chain this Schism to summon the Winda in response to their card that special summons a monster, Winda will be summoned to the field. Their card that special summons a monster will resolve and special summon that monster, and they'll have unwittingly used that one special summon they get while Winda's face up and no longer be able to special summon. There is another effect that occasionally comes up but doesn't usually, which is that you can send to the graveyard one monster your opponent controls with the same attribute as the fusion summon monster. A lot of times you're just slamming down Winda to pin down the opponent. So that doesn't always come up, but it's good to keep in mind that it is able to do that when you use the Schism's effect. Finally, the monster you summon can't attack directly. Just keep that in mind. Use that monster to destroy opponent's monsters in battle. It generally doesn't matter too much. Just be aware of it when you're sequencing your attacks. The real heart of the deck is El Shaddolls Construct. He's the guy you really want to be fusion summoning, because he has a 2800 attack. Anytime he battles a special summon monster, his effect will just destroy that monster at the start of the damage step. And when he's summoned, or rather if he's summoned, you're able to send a Shaddolls card from your deck to your graveyard, which will, if you send a monster, trigger its effect. All of the Shaddolls monsters have effects where if they're sent to the graveyard by a card effect, that effect will activate. So El Shaddolls Construct will give you access to pretty much all of those effects. Falco will summon itself back from the graveyard. Genius is really just in there for Shekinaga, which we'll talk about later, although it can be helpful. Hedgehog, being sent to the graveyard by a card effect, allows you to search for another Shaddolls monster, which might help set up another fusion summon. Squamata is kind of a wild card. If it's sent to the graveyard, you can send another Shaddolls card from your deck to the graveyard, and it also helps to load up the graveyard for using the effect of Shaddolls Incarnation, as well as the effect of Shaddolls Schism. Dragon destroys an opponent's spell or trap card. Shaddolls Wendy lets you special summon a Shaddolls monster from your deck if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect. And Shaddolls Beast lets you draw a card, which is nice if you're digging for something specific, including the backup of the 3 copies of Ice Dragon's Prison I'm playing. You'll typically use Shaddolls Fusion, which is added to the deck by the skill, or the Schism, which is added to the deck by the skill to fusion summon, or you'll use the main deck 3 copies of El Shaddolls Fusion, which is a quick play spell that can fusion summon, so you can even use it in the battle phase, and the 1 copy of Magistus Invocation. The Invocation is in there because it's searchable by Riliona, the Magistus of Vare. It works just like polymerization as long as you're using a spellcaster monster in the fusion summon, which you pretty much always are. Riliona is a light monster, which is a spellcaster, so you can use her, as is Artemis, the Magistus Moon Maiden, who's basically in the extra deck so that you can trade in almost any of your Shaddolls monsters. Not Genius, since it's a machine, but the almost any, and not Wendy because she's psychic, but any of the other and I guess not Beast, though he's never on the field waiting for a Link summon. But you could use the Dragon, the Squamata, the Hedgehog, and the Falco as Link materials to summon Artemis, effectively trading them in for a light monster to facilitate a fusion summon of El Shaddol Construct. So even though there's not a lot of light monsters in the main deck, it's just the 3 Riliona, you have a bunch of monsters you can trade in for Artemis to get that light monster on the field so that you're able to then fusion summon El Shaddol Construct, dump a Shaddol monster to your graveyard, and get the deck running. The Genius I mentioned earlier is really just in there because it's an Earth Shaddol monster. So you can use it as a Shaddol monster, as a fusion material, when it's a fusion material for any of the Shaddol monsters, whether it be fusion monsters, whether it be Winda, Shekinaga, or Construct. But more importantly, you can use it as the Earth monster when summoning Shekinaga. Shekinaga's pretty good with its 3,000 defense points. You could always flip it down into pink as well by banishing Shaddol Incarnation from your graveyard. But it also has an effect that negates the activation of a monster effect that your opponent uses from a special summoned monster on your opponent's field. And it destroys that monster, then sends a Shaddol card from your hand to the graveyard, which in turn triggers that Shaddol monster's effect. So it's another way to pin down your opponent's plays, in addition to Winda restricting their special summons, and then Construct making it difficult to defeat you in battle with special summoned monsters. A lot of Shaddol decks actually don't use Ice Dragon's Prison. You do need multiple cards typically to get everything up and running because you're fusing together 2 monsters and using a fusion spell to start summoning Construct and get the ball rolling. So I think players might be a little concerned about not having a strong enough opening play if they're using cards like Ice Dragon's Prison that don't actually interact with the Shaddol theme. I think it's worth the gamble. I think the card is so powerful. It can just single-handedly shut down a lot of strategies and interrupt a lot of plays. Plus, I like being able to dig for an extremely relevant back row card with Shaddol Beast. Or even just back up some of my plays with an Ice Dragon's Prison because it makes me feel like I have a complete lock on the game. It's a limited 3 card. The deck has no limited 3 cards otherwise, so I think it's worth playing. Super Polymerization I've used in previous versions of the build. It's really dependent on the metagame and if you expect to see a lot of light monsters, dark monsters, and now earth monsters. But for this tournament, I actually put the Super Polymerization in my side deck instead, and sided it in matches where I thought it would be relevant. The additional Link monsters are just there for some versatility. You can actually use Gravity Controller to get rid of a Winda that you special summon to the extra monster zone if you wish to do so. And it also is able to get rid of monsters in the opponent's extra monster zone that you otherwise can't destroy either by battle or card effects, since when it battles them, you can return the Gravity Controller and the opponent's monster to the deck. So that does actually come in handy once in a while. Nightmare Phoenix and Nightmare Unicorn are just 2 of the Nightmare Link monsters that are pretty easy to use because you can use any 2 or 3 monsters with different names to summon them. The Phoenix can destroy back row cards. The Unicorn can send anything back to the deck. In a bind, sometimes they just come up and they'll help. Despite this being a fusion-based strategy, the extra deck space is interestingly not that tight because you're really just summoning Construct. If you're using an Earth monster like Genius, you might summon Shekinaga once. And if you're using a fire monster, you can summon El Shaddol Grista. But for the most part, you really do have the space in the extra deck. So I think the Nightmare Phoenix and the Nightmare Unicorn are probably last picks. But I do play them. Also, all of the Shaddol fusion monsters have effects where if they're sent to the graveyard, you can target a Shaddol spell or trap in the graveyard and add it to your hand. And if you link them away, it activates those effects. So this deck is very resilient. It can draw cards easily, return cards easily, access cards easily, and it really has that silver bullet of El Shaddol Winda against several different decks. So I really like it. did win the Duel Links main event in July using this exact build you see on the screen. And I would recommend it if you're a fan of Shaddolls. I consider it one of the top decks now, and I think it'll continue to be a threat in PvP dueling. I also see that most players, or a lot of players, probably most, use one copy of Shaddol Hound. Its flip effect lets you target a Shaddol card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. And if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can change the battle position of a monster. I don't really like this card. I don't think it's useful enough to include in the deck, to be honest. I think you have more than enough ways to access the Shaddol Schism using either the effects of your fusion monsters that can be sent to the graveyard, and the Construct's effect that can send Schism to the graveyard, or more commonly, just using the flip effect of Shaddol Hedgehog, which you can trigger by banishing the Resh Shaddol Incarnation from your graveyard. And don't forget, Resh Shaddol Incarnation is always in your graveyard because 2 random Shaddol traps will be sent to your graveyard at the start of the duel. And that actually happens before the Schism is sent to the graveyard. So the Schism will actually remain in your deck. So it'll as long as you're only playing 2 copies of Resh Shaddol Incarnation, as far as Shaddol trap cards go, they'll always be in the graveyard. So I don't think the Hound is worth it. If you disagree and want to try to convince me otherwise, let me know in the comments why you think Hound is worth playing in the main deck. I also used Grista in previous versions of the deck. I think it became outclassed when Shekinaga came out, so I cut it. For the most part, I would rather summon Shekinaga than Grista. So I think the Shekinaga and Genius package just made more sense to play. With that, I'll jump into the replay. Streaming is not allowed in the Duel Links main event, but I was specifically told that saving the replays is permitted. So I'll jump into that, and you're able to watch it. So my opponent in the finals was playing an Ignoble Knight deck. He actually beat me 2-1 earlier in the tournament, so I knew what he was playing. In this matchup, I prefer to go first. It makes things a lot easier because if I can summon El Shaddol Winda, it makes it really tough for the opponent because the Ignoble Knight deck wants to special summon multiple times in a turn, and Winda pins them down to only once. Here, I open with the Hedgehog and the El Shaddol Fusion, but I want to make sure I get the access to Winda. So I banish the 2 traps from the graveyard to flip the Hedgehog down, get Schism. Then I can link summon Artemis using the face-up Hedgehog, so I have a light monster, and I can use El Shaddol Fusion to summon Construct. Construct sends Squamata to the grave. Squamata sends Beast, which lets me draw a card. I pick up another El Shaddol Fusion, and I set both the Schism and the Ice Dragon's Prison. So now I'm in a really good shape because I'm able to special summon the Winda using the Schism. I do it on his normal summon before he can link summon. He summons. The reason I don't have to fear the Gearfried is because if he special summons it, I can banish it using Ice Dragon's Prison, and then that would be his 1 special summon for the turn. So Winda does pair nicely with Ice Dragon's Prison. Just be aware that's also your 1 special summon for the turn. So if you have a Wendy that flips, you can't actually use its effect to special summon. My opponent also has an Ice Dragon's Prison, though, and he uses that to banish the Winda. I can re-access it, though, using the other part of the Shaddol skill, which actually once per duel, as long as all the cards in your deck are spellcasters or Shaddolls, you get to send one of your banished cards back to your deck, so you can always regain Winda. My opponent just wasn't able to recover from being pinned down by Winda. He had the struggle. He had the Ice Dragon's Prison, but he wasn't able to pull it together. He lost that game. thought I had a 3-game match in the finals, but it looks like I only have 2 games saved. So I don't know if it was just a very long game 2, or if I screwed up and didn't save a 3rd game. But he gets to go first in this game. I have an okay hand. I have the light monster that searches for a fusion spell, and I have the hedgehog. Synchro summon Captain Roland. This is where it's great. Once they go into the extra deck and you're second and have Shaddolls Fusion in your hand, you're in pretty good shape, because that first fusion summon is going to be from the using materials from the main deck, and you're going to be able to choose what you want. So I actually go straight for the Shekinaga, which can negate the effect of a face-up special summon monster, which was really strong there. Start dismantling his field, use the El Shaddolls Fusion to summon the Construct, and then destroy his Gearfried. He does summon more Gearfrieds, and he attacks my Shekinaga. I flip it down, clears my field. It's going a little fast, but Ice Dragon's Prison was really strong there because it got rid of the synchro monster from his graveyard, as well as a threat from his field. Let's slow down the game. Even when this deck is just setting monsters, sometimes that's actually not bad, because they have good flip effects. So as long as you can survive through your opponent's plays, which often you can, you can make the game go longer and then use it to turn it around. I actually brought Shaddolls Incarnation back from the graveyard with the effect of one of the fusion monsters when it was sent to the graveyard. It can special summon one of your Shaddolls monsters from the grave, and bring back Shekinaga is pretty good here. By surviving the turn, I was then able to use the Shaddolls Fusion on the following turn, fusing from the deck to make Construct. I can order the Chain Links as well, which is actually a new feature in Duel Links, to make sure that the Dragon's effect resolved and was able to destroy the relevant card in the back row, and then using El Shaddolls Fusion in the battle phase lets me summon the window to win. If there was a third duel for this match, which now I don't remember because it was a couple weeks ago, I apologize for not saving it. So I don't know what went wrong, but I really think it was a 2-1 victory. But I did lose to him 2-1 earlier in the tournament as well. It was close, but they were very good games. I'm concerned about the matchup against Sky Striker. I think with Widow Anchor being able to take the Construct or take Winda with its secondary effect when there are 3 spells in your opponent's grave, the opponent can pretty quickly just turn the tides of the duel. But we'll see how relevant Sky Striker becomes and whether it becomes a top meta deck with the new cards in it. I think this deck has a phenomenal matchup against other popular decks, particularly Boral Link, which really does not want to limit itself to a single special summoner in a turn. So there's always that advantage for this deck as well, because I don't think Boral Link is going anywhere anytime soon, unless it also gets hit by a Forbidden Unlimited list update. So that's the Shaddolls deck that I used to win the July Duel Links main event. Unfortunately, I won't be playing in the one in August because it is the same weekend as a YCS Sacramento, which I'll be at. But hopefully, the one in September will not be on a weekend I'm busy, and hopefully I'll be able to play in that one, possibly with Shaddolls. So far, I've been playing different decks in each Duel Links main event. I haven't played the same deck in 2 in a row for several months, which is really a testament to the changing metagame and the diversity in Duel Links, which is what keeps it interesting. I hope this video was informative. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I'll try to reply to as many as I can. If you ask them within a couple weeks of the video being posted. And if you think that I'm missing some card inclusions in this deck list, or you think that there's some strategy I'm missing out on, let me know as well. Always looking to improve my own game.